You ate breakfast this morning. Maybe you cooked eggs. Maybe you toasted bread. Maybe you just heated something up. You didn't think about it. But that single act, applying heat to food before putting it in your mouth, is so deeply embedded in what it means to be human that we have been doing it for so long that we have completely forgotten there was a time when we didn't. And here is the thing that should stop you cold. For the first several million years of human evolution, before fire, before cooking, before any heat was applied to anything, your ancestors were eating every single day, raw, unprocessed, uncooked. And what they were eating and how their bodies handled it and what happened to the human species the moment that changed tells a story about your body, your brain, and your face that you are living with right now, today, every time you sit down to eat. Let's start with what was actually on the menu. The earliest members of the human lineage, the Australopithecines, the group that includes the famous Lucy fossil discovered in Ethiopia in 1974, were eating roughly what you would expect from an animal living in the African savanna between 3 and 4 million years ago. Fruits, tubers, leaves, seeds, insects. Occasionally, when the opportunity presented itself, meat, but not cooked meat, not processed meat. Raw animal tissue, consumed as quickly as possible before competing scavengers arrived, torn apart with hands and teeth from carcasses that larger predators had already killed. Isotopic analysis of Australopithecine teeth, a technique that reads the chemical signature of what an animal ate during its lifetime, preserved permanently in the enamel, tells us that these early humans had a remarkably flexible diet. They were not specialists. They ate whatever was available, whatever the season provided, whatever they could find, catch, or scavenge before something larger took it from them. But flexibility has a cost. A diet of raw plant material is extraordinarily difficult to digest. Cellulose, the structural component of plant cell walls, is essentially inaccessible to the human digestive system without either cooking or extremely prolonged fermentation. Raw tubers, the underground storage organs of plants, which were among the most calorie-dense and reliably available food sources in the African landscape, are so resistant to digestion in their raw state that the caloric yield from eating them uncooked is a fraction of what cooking releases. A raw potato, which is a reasonable modern analog for the kind of tuber that early humans would have encountered, delivers perhaps 40% of its available calories when eaten raw. The rest passes through the digestive system largely unprocessed. Your body works hard for very little return. This is why the gut tells the story better than almost any other piece of anatomy. Australopithecines had enormous digestive systems relative to their body size. The gut is expensive tissue. It consumes a disproportionate share of the body's total energy budget just to maintain itself. A large gut is the adaptation of an animal that needs to process enormous quantities of low-quality raw food to extract sufficient calories to survive. Modern chimpanzees, whose diet consists largely of raw fruit, leaves, and the occasional small animal, have guts roughly 3 times larger relative to body size than modern humans. They spend between 6 and 8 hours a day just chewing. Chewing is work. It is calorie-expensive, time-consuming, mechanical work that the chimpanzee body is built around in a way that the human body demonstrably is not. Human jaw muscles are dramatically weaker than chimpanzee jaw muscles. Human teeth are dramatically smaller. Human intestines are dramatically shorter. These are not minor variations. They are the structural signature of an animal that stopped needing to mechanically process enormous quantities of tough, raw food somewhere in its evolutionary past. And the question of exactly when that happened and why is one of the most consequential questions in the entire history of human evolution. Harvard primatologist Richard Wrangham has spent decades developing and defending the answer. His hypothesis, published in its most complete form in his 2009 book, Catching Fire, How Cooking Made Us Human, argues that the adoption of cooking was not a consequence of becoming human. It was a cause. The shift to cooked food, Wrangham argues, was the dietary change that released the evolutionary pressure maintaining large guts, large jaws, and large teeth, and redirected the energy savings from a smaller, more efficient digestive system toward the one organ whose dramatic expansion defines the human lineage above all others: the brain. The human brain is the most metabolically expensive organ in the known animal kingdom. It consumes approximately 20% of the body's total caloric budget at rest, despite representing only 2% of body weight. You cannot build and maintain a brain like that on a diet of raw food processed by a body that has to spend most of its energy budget running an enormous digestive system. Something had to give. And what gave, Wrangham argues, was the raw food diet, replaced first intermittently and then systematically by cooked food whose caloric availability was so dramatically higher than the raw equivalent that it created the metabolic surplus required to fuel the neurological expansion that separates the human lineage from every other primate that has ever lived. But here is where the story gets genuinely complicated. Because the oldest solid evidence of controlled fire in the archaeological record, the Wonderwork cave site in South Africa, dates to approximately 1 million years ago, and the dramatic expansion of the human brain begins significantly earlier than that, in the fossil record of Homo erectus, around 1.8 million years ago. There is a gap of approximately 800,000 years between the brain expansion that Wrangham's hypothesis requires cooking to explain and the earliest archaeological evidence that cooking was actually happening. And that gap has produced one of the most vigorous debates in paleoanthropology, because it forces the question that the cooking hypothesis creates but cannot fully answer. What were they eating in the meantime? Several answers have been proposed, and none of them is entirely satisfying, which is itself a significant fact about the state of the science. One possibility is that the archaeological evidence for fire is simply older than we have yet found, that cooking was happening before 1 million years ago, but that the evidence has not been preserved or not yet been discovered. Fire leaves traces in the archaeological record that are fragile and discontinuous. An open fire on a riverbank, used once, might leave no recoverable evidence whatsoever. The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence, and the gap between the brain expansion and the fire evidence may be a gap in the record, rather than a gap in the behavior. A second possibility is that early Homo erectus was processing food in ways that enhanced its caloric availability without full cooking, pounding, slicing, marinating in acidic plant juices, stone tool use to break down the mechanical structure of meat and tubers before eating. These techniques would not produce the full caloric enhancement of cooking, but they might have produced enough of an improvement over unprocessed raw food to fuel a partial brain expansion, while the full transition to systematic cooking was still developing. The teeth know something the rest of the skeleton does not always reveal. Dental microwear analysis, the examination of microscopic scratch and pit patterns on the surface of fossil teeth using electron microscopy, allows researchers to reconstruct the mechanical properties of what an ancient human was eating with remarkable precision. Hard, brittle foods like seeds and nuts leave a distinctive pattern of small, regular pits. Tough, fibrous foods like raw meat and leaves leave long parallel scratches. Soft foods, cooked foods, ripe fruits, processed plant material leave relatively smooth surfaces with minimal wear. When researchers analyzed the dental microwear of early Homo erectus specimens, they found patterns consistent with a diet that included significantly softer foods than the Australopithecines that preceded them. Not proof of cooking, but consistent with it, or with food processing techniques that approximated its mechanical effects. What the isotopic evidence adds to this picture is equally suggestive. Studies of carbon isotopes in Homo erectus tooth enamel indicate an increased consumption of C4 plants, the category that includes grasses and sedges whose underground storage organs, the starchy corms and rhizomes of the African savanna, are calorie-dense but nearly indigestible when raw. These are exactly the foods that would benefit most dramatically from cooking or mechanical processing. The diet is telling you what the campfire sites have not yet confirmed. And then there is the face. Look at a reconstruction of Homo erectus, then look in the mirror. The differences are significant, but the direction of change is unmistakable. Homo erectus already has a dramatically reduced face compared to the Australopithecines, smaller brow ridges, smaller teeth, a less pronounced prognathic jaw. The face is retreating, the chewing apparatus is shrinking, the skull is rounding and expanding to accommodate a brain that is growing at a rate unprecedented in the primate lineage. This is the physical signature of an animal in the process of offloading the mechanical work of food processing to external technology, to stone tools, to fire, to the transformation of food before it enters the mouth rather than after. The face is not just an aesthetic fact. It is a record of dietary history written in bone, legible to anyone who knows how to read it. Your face is smaller than your ancestors' faces. Your jaw is weaker. Your teeth are tiny compared to the primates you share a common ancestor with. You cannot eat raw tubers efficiently. You cannot digest raw grains at all. You are, in the most literal anatomical sense, a cooked food animal. Your body was built by cooking over a period of nearly 2 million years, and it has been so thoroughly optimized for cooked food that returning to a fully raw diet is not a return to some more natural state. It is a dietary experiment that your digestive system is genuinely not equipped to handle at the caloric density required to fuel the brain sitting in your skull. Here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The transition from raw to cooked food was not just a change in diet, it was a change in time. Cooking food means spending time preparing food, time that is no longer available for foraging, for moving, for the continuous alimentary labor that raw food primates devote the majority of their waking hours to. Cooking concentrates calories so efficiently that the time required to meet the body's daily energy needs drops dramatically. Chimpanzees spend roughly half their waking hours eating. Modern hunter-gatherers, cooking their food, spend a fraction of that. The hours that cooking freed were the hours that became available for everything else, for tool making, for social bonding, for the kind of extended, non-urgent, creative mental activity that raw food primates living on the metabolic edge simply cannot afford. The campfire that cooked the food was the same campfire around which the stories were told and the culture was built. The diet and the civilization are not separate stories. They are the same story, beginning with the question of what happens when you stop eating your food raw and start transforming it before it enters your body. Your ancestors ate raw food for millions of years. They had enormous guts, massive jaws, and spent most of their waking hours chewing. Then something changed. The evidence of exactly when is still being argued over by researchers with electron microscopes and isotope ratios and fossil teeth. But the outcome is sitting in your skull right now, burning 20% of everything you eat, just to keep the lights on. The most expensive organ in the animal kingdom, paid for by the most transformative dietary shift in the history of the primate lineage, fueled ultimately by fire. And before that, by the long, grinding, calorically exhausting work of eating the world raw and surviving it just long enough for something better to come along.